У гармонії з демократичним світом українська стрілецька громада урочисто вшанувала День 8 травня – День перемоги в Європі та вклад українців у воєнні зусилля Канади у Другій світовій війні.
Good evening and welcome to the Ukrainian War Veterans Association VE Day commemoration. Let us go back in time to April 30th, 1945. With Berlin surrounded and reduced to rubble, Adolf Hitler committed suicide in his bunker. During his brief spell as Germany's succeeding leader, Grand Admiral Karl Dönitz negotiated an end to the war with the Allies. At his headquarters in Reims, France, Supreme Allied Commander General Eisenhower accepted the unconditional surrender of all German forces from German General Alfred Jodl. Their surrender came into effect the following day, the 8th of May, and this day is referred to as Victory in Europe, or VE Day, and it sparked celebrations throughout Europe and North America. We will learn a little bit more about Ukrainian-Canadian contributions later this evening with the screening of A Canadian War Story.
The goal of the movie, A Canadian War Story, is to pay tribute to the Ukrainian-Canadian military personnel that contributed to the Allied victory in World War II. Before the war, Ukrainian Canadians were often regarded as non-preferred second-class citizens. However, Ukrainians in great numbers enlisted to fight for Canada. In fact, Ukrainian enlistment percentage was the highest of any ethnic group outside of the British.
In 1991, active conflict took place yet again in Europe, this time in the former Republic of Yugoslavia. The Yugoslav wars were a series of ethnic conflicts, wars of independence, and insurgencies that took place over a 10-year span. At one point, NATO troop strengths in the region reached 60,000. Tens of thousands of Canadian Armed Forces members strived over the years to help make the region secure and nurture the fragile peace that so recovery could continue after years of fierce fighting. A brief period of peace then ensued in Europe until the summer of 2008, when the Russian Federation launched a full-scale land, air, and sea invasion of the democratic and sovereign state of Georgia. Russia referred to this invasion as a peace enforcement operation, and to this day occupies significant parts of Georgia. Little was done to immediately punish Russia for this invasion, and many believe that this only emboldened Russia to take military action against other neighbors when it desired to do so without a fear of backlash from the world. And we all know what happened next. It seems that not a day or a week go by when a mass grave is uncovered, or a forced deportation of Ukrainian residents is reported, or an indiscriminate Russian attack is perpetrated against civilian targets. These are scenes reminiscent of World War II, a war that led to the adoption of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, as the international community vowed never again to allow the atrocities of World War II to reoccur. Ukraine, more than any European nation today, longs for a Victory in Ukraine Day, a second VE Day where Ukraine can once again exist as a state with full control of its destiny and territory on the ground, in the air, and on the sea. And I assure you, on that day, we'll be holding a VE2 Day celebration here as well, and all of you are invited.
On behalf of the Canadian Armed Forces, on behalf of Task Force Unifiers, wanted to say to this group especially, thank you very much for your ongoing support of both Canada and Ukrainian interests. Sirs, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here tonight, and it is my honor and my privilege to be a part of this event. The amount of effort that Canada has been putting forward is especially important for you to understand. There is a lot of negativity that surrounds the Canadian Armed Forces. I won't deny that. But what I am here to amplify is the good work that is actually being done and that you deserve to hear more of. So in the 6 months that our task force really restarted Operation Unifier was able to train in excess of 2,250 Ukrainian students. This covered a significant amount of content. We were training basic recruits in the United Kingdom. In Poland, we were training engineers, tank crewmen, artillery personnel. Towards the end of the tour, medics, as well as in Germany, we trained armored combat support vehicle drivers and operators. None of this is a secret, but this needs to be known. This needs to be shared amongst the community as to how much the Canadian Armed Forces and the government is doing to support Ukraine. The story, however, does not end there, and it is the individual skills that the Ukrainians are bringing is where the true passion lies. We're taking Ukrainian soldiers from an incredibly diverse pool and turning them into combat medics in about that same month-long period. The first course that we ran, we had individuals that only 2 weeks prior had been anesthesiologists or coal miners, and yet came together understanding what the need was. In January, Canada made the commitment to donate 8 Leopard 2A4 main battle tanks, in addition to what was being donated by our international allies, whether it be Poland, Germany, Norway, the UK, the United States, Spain, all contributing in order to provide as much Western equipment and technology as possible. We would take Ukrainian tankers that had experience with extremely old Russian technology, T-55s, T-64s, T-72s, items that had been familiar to those that had grown up through the 50s, 60s, and 70s, and transition them in a 30-day window to Western technology. For context, it takes Canadians on our own courses months to achieve full capacity as a student learner. The Ukrainians arrived to those training sites with more motivation than I've ever seen, a desire to learn because they understood what was at stake, and being able to transition from antiquated platforms to some of the most advanced systems in the world at that time. As much as I will talk about the success, there is only so much you can do in 1 month. Almost all of our training took place in 30 days. The balancing of quality and quantity, the input of dedicated soldiers, and trying in as best as you could in 1 month to turn them into a fighting force is complicated. It is not easy, and it often has varying levels of effectiveness. The Armed Forces General Staff in Kyiv would often ask us to put more content. But again, as we all know as adults, as learners, the human brain being a sponge can only absorb so much. So that was a challenge, trying to figure out what needed to be taught versus what was nice to be taught. My peers, my colleagues have been to Bosnia, Afghanistan, Iraq, understanding that we could not simply replicate what we've done there and expect it to work here. So understanding that we could go in small numbers, teach individual courses, expand, be very responsive, that was the biggest issue. We couldn't be constrained by long-term planning. As we know in this room, this conflict has changed significantly in only 1 year. When we typically go into places, we go into countries for generations, or we have at least for the last 20 years. There are 2 issues that bear repeating for Canada in this conflict. The one that we cannot escape is time. Ukraine doesn't have it. Reality is that this conflict has been going for almost a decade. It's just now been brought to the forefront because of the size of it. What we saw is the reemergence or the increased awareness of the Ukrainian cultural identity, of separation from Russia, the Russian language, the Russian culture. Make no mistake, there is a divergence among the student population. Historically, we had taught our courses for Ukrainians in Ukraine in Russian. That did not go over well when we arrived this time. My last slide was basically just going to say, Slava Ukraini, thank you for your time and thank you very much.